going to call the January 7, 2021 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. If the administrator would kindly call the roll.
Hank Bagelmann.
Here.
Kate Payne.
Here.
Doug Benschoter.
Here.
Richard Dane. Mary French. Stephanie Garner. I saw her move, but I didn't hear, so I'm going to count her present. David Huser.
Here.
Kathy Olson. Heidi Solheim.
Here.
Okay, we have the agenda, which has been sent out to you. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additions, corrections? We're good. Those in favor say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. And the agenda is approved as distributed. The minutes of the December 3rd meeting of 2020 have been sent out. Any additions, corrections, and a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor say yes.
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 Those opposed, no. And the minutes are approved as distributed. There are no public hearings this evening. We do have an item of regular business, and that's the vacation and conveyance of Pinehurst Point and Spyglass Hill. Isaac, if you give the administrator's point of view.
All right. All right, so I've got the aerial here of the two cul-de-sacs that we'll be talking about vacating and conveying today. It's Pinehurst Point and Spyglass Hill. In case, for those that aren't familiar with this stretch of Eagle Ridge Drive, this is where it goes from pavement to gravel road. I'm sure that everyone is aware that the Prairie Links Golf Course development has kind of been put together in a lot of different segments throughout the years. And this is kind of the last piece of road that has houses coming off of it and parcels that are ready to be developed that needs to be completed. So the city's been in contact with the owner of these parcels, which is Echo Development. And the city has come up with a development agreement that has been included in the packets for the commission. And basically part of the development agreement says that the city will vacate these two cul-de-sacs and then convey them to Echo Development. At that point, they'll both become essentially private drives. The parcels that will be developed off of the private drives, they'll enter into a homeowners association, and then they'll be responsible for the cost of developing the cul-de-sacs, maintaining them, so on and so forth. So from a city staff standpoint, this is going to get the rest of Eagle Ridge Drive completed. It's going to increase the safety for both pedestrians and vehicles in that area. So from the staff standpoint, we think that this is a really good move. Staff's recommendation is to approve the vacation and conveyance of Pinehurst Point and Spyglass Hill to Echo Development.
Okay, discussion? Any comments or questions?
Do we know what they, are they going to follow what the current plat is laid out with the number of lots, or are they going to do something different?
They're going to keep the lots as is and develop those as they are right there. There's 3 off of Pinehurst and 4 off of Spyglass, and all the other lots will stay the same. the property next to Lagerschulte, that long kind of triangle piece along the road is an easement, so that's not going to be part of that lot.
Okay.
Yeah, the only other potential changes are kind of the corner lots of Eagle Ridge and Spyglass Hill and Pinehurst Point. Right now, they're set up so that you could put driveways off of either Eagle Ridge or the cul-de-sac. Likely that'll change so that they'll only have driveways off of Eagle Ridge Drive. But that won't affect the type of development that will go on those lots.
Other questions, comments?
Do we know who's the primary owner of Eco Development, or is that public information?
Eco Development is the lead investor, and that is Dahlstrom, Brent Dahlstrom.
Okay.
I'm trying to think back to times when if we've done this before, or if we've had this come up before since I've been on the commission. I'm just not really sure what the city's precedence has been in the past for developments like this, and
It's
how we normally work through.
Yeah, this is somewhat unusual. This road has been undeveloped for about 14 years, 15 years since the developer transferred the property to the bank and quit developing. It's a pretty important link now because of the parkway, especially. It really hasn't been done because the circumstances haven't been the same in past situations, but the city has not necessarily provided assistance in situations just like this. This is one of those things that the streets were dedicated back in '99 before it was started. And then once the original developer was out of the picture, that became a little bit more murky because there was no performance bond in order to complete the streets. We were approached about doing this. Conversation continued for a couple of years, a year or two. And we decided that we just put it before the council for a decision at this point. It would be a good section to get finished. It's almost all built out in this subdivision. We do need lots in the community. It seemed to be a good fit this year.
Are there other roads in this that are privately held, like these cul-de-sacs will be? I just think it's kind of funny. The snowplow will go through, but it won't do those cul-de-sacs.
Yes, the two areas with Augusta Circle is a private drive all the way to Augusta Lane, and then the Fairways, which is the other development that has a private drive. It'll be a lot like that. They do their own snow removal. What happens is, generally speaking, they do it for all of the properties that front onto there, in addition to the cul-de-sac. So it's pretty efficient that way, and it works in other areas too. We prefer. I mean, a cul-de-sac is more difficult for our city plows. I mean, I think it works as well to have it privately done, and some people like the privacy of having their own drive.
So are there any other areas of that entire development that they're going to be looking back to the city in the future? Like I see tag along is kind of out there. That would be their responsibility and not the city's.
Actually, what we did in the development agreement is to confirm that the city would not participate in any way in tag along trail development.
Okay.
The cul-de-sacs at Oakwood and Oak Ridge were both private too when those were developed, which is just adjacent to this development.
These work pretty well to be private because They're short duration, just a few lots off of them. I think it works pretty well. When you have a longer one, there's sometimes you have to have drainage issues or some drainage provisions. These don't require that because they're small enough. It works. We like to have private drives in some situations. It just keeps the plows from having to do these little areas that are hard to clean.
So, Bill, would the construction of the cul-de-sacs of streets be similar to what's been done in Augusta Circle?
Yes.
As far as depth and curve and width?
No curb. That would be one of those situations where they could do it if they felt they needed to direct water. But generally speaking, it'll just be a straight edge or a small, curb, not a full-size curb.
Other questions, comments?
So as far as this fits into the city's, budget and financial stuff, isn't necessarily our commission's responsibility? Is it more just, does this make sense from a planning and zoning perspective? Is that what you're somewhat looking for?
Yes, because the development agreement was approved by the council on the 10th. Technically speaking, though, when we vacate property, we like to have planning and zoning weigh in on that decision. They've committed to doing it, but this worked out this way because we really took it to the council in December to find out if they were interested in doing it. Because frankly, had they not been interested in doing it, we didn't want to waste a lot of time doing the vacation and those kinds of things. So we sort of did it a little bit backwards here to see if they were willing to participate in the development agreement first.
So really, then we're just recommending or not recommending the vacation and the conveyance. Everything else is really city council's.
Right. If you were to say, we think it should be a city street and the development agreement would still be intact, it would result in some additional costs. And so then we have to go back and figure out who would pay those costs. And one of the reasons of doing it as a private is not as expensive to do the cul-de-sacs when you're doing them as a private drive. And so it makes some sense to reduce the cost for both the developer and the city in this situation. Because frankly, these are all city streets. Generally speaking, we'd require developers to, if they were platted, to provide bonding so that we could ensure that they would be built if the developer didn't do it. But in this situation, it's been a long time, and we think this is a valuable connection to make. We've got the bond proceeds that we can use for this project. We don't have to do any additional borrowing, so it makes some sense.
If they would meet the city standards with curb and construction, could they be dedicated back to the city?
I think if they wanted to do that, we would have said yes, that was okay. Because frankly, the construction costs are the ones that are, it's more expensive. We might have done it a little differently too as a city street, because we still could have done somewhat of an alternative design, but we like to be consistent when it's a city street. So there wouldn't have been, there isn't any storm sewer in this in these cul-de-sacs, which makes it easier. Utilities go in the street or in the private drive. That gives you a little bit more flexibility too, because you can bring the water service up into the cul-de-sac and then take the services out to each lot. And the utilities that'll come in later, whether it be the electricity and then the cable and the fiber, they have a little more flexibility when you basically reserve the whole cul-de-sac as your utility easement.
Has city engineering looked at the kind of unusual offset for the way that they don't line up with each other?
Yes. Well, what happened was that this was already done. So the plat is already of record. So as long as nobody's making any changes, they have a right to develop it as is. I think they would have okayed the offset. It's not a crossing street, and generally there's only 3 or 4 houses coming off of each of them. So we wouldn't do a cross street this way with a jig jog like that. But I think with the cul-de-sacs, it would have been fine, even today.
Do we have any other comments? Are you ready for a motion?
Okay, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the vacation and conveyance of Pinehurst Point and Spyglass Hill to Echo Development to be developed as a private drive access to City Council.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Heidi? Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say yes.
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 Those opposed, no. And the motion is carried unanimously. Moving on to new business. We've had a revision to the regulations in Chapter 103 Subdivision Code. And Bill Werner, you're going to give us some leadership on this one.
So we've been struggling with the subdivision code through 3 zoning administrators. To some extent, because it was an older drafted code, and then it just kind of been added to and subtracted from at times. And we felt it didn't, even though we're not really wanting to make a lot of change, we wanted to use a better, clearer way of setting up the steps for subdivisions to be developed. We brought in some things through that were now in the engineering standards, that kind of thing. Want to put them in the same place, and we're going to use this to do checklists and timelines for developers. We're trying to make it a very, and trying to set some criteria for us too. We've got time limits on how quickly we have to move to work with the subdividers, so we can't put them off. So nobody can complain as long as we're following our timelines. And we feel this is a good rewrite of the subdivision ordinance. The things that are changed really when it comes down to it, this isn't changing really the substantive part of it, except for parkland dedication and the ability to set aside trails and green space. We've kind of brought in some more modern provisions that have been used in other communities. And the Supreme Court has said we can't require people we can't make them pay with parkland dedication, which is what most people want to do. But they said that's really illegal to do that. We can't just charge them for that. I think it raises questions as to whether or not we can actually make them give us land of a certain amount too. So what we've provided in this new subdivision ordinance is that it allows a voluntary dedication of parkland. What we anticipate is, and the other part of this is, Leisure Services doesn't want to park in every single subdivision or every single small subdivision. It really is wanting to strategically place parks. So if a developer had a 40-acre parcel that they were going to put 120 lots on, it clearly would require some kind of provision for parkland dedication, because we would want to have another park in an area that big. But some of them are being infilled near areas where the park's already there. So we really don't want to just make them give us land that we don't want to use for a park, and make them be more strategic and being more consistent with the idea of actually using trail dedications too. And we've started doing that already anyway, rather than have a parkland within a new subdivision. Sometimes you just have a trail connection that goes into the subdivision, connects up with other trail systems. And we find that people really like that a lot more than a place that has maybe a few items of playground equipment that doesn't get maintained and doesn't get used. So it gives us some flexibility when new subdivisions are being proposed. Our goal is to keep having enough parks around that people can reach them pretty easily. And so when they work, we want them to do it. And that'll be just required as a part of the plating process. So those are the different changes. I know this was kind of quick, but I wanted to get it on for you to bring it to your attention. We won't bring it back until next month to actually make a recommendation to the council. I just felt like you could ask questions at the beginning, or if you've seen or looked through some of it and have some questions early on. We're still in that stage where we're kind of working on the drafting aspect of it. So now or in the next 3 weeks, if you have some issues or some questions about it, you can certainly email Isaac and I, and we can try to address those questions and maybe even suggestions for change or modification. So tonight was just the introduction of this to the group and to start the discussion that we can finish next month.
So Bill and Isaac, would it be possible to at least have the sections that have changed highlighted? Something like this for me is kind of like it's all new. And so if I have to try to compare two documents side by side to figure out what changed, it doesn't have to be like a track changes, but at least a highlight of the sections or parts of it that have.
Well, I'll tell you that basically we did a complete rewrite. So it wouldn't really follow as well. You can take both of them and just kind of have them side by side and look at the definitions. We've improved some of the definitions. The definitions kind of remain the same in some ways, but they're organized better, and we're using new language on some of them. There's some things that weren't included in the other subdivision ordinance, but we were doing these through standards that, building standards or design standards. And now we've tried to collect them in one location. So the subdividers aren't going back and forth from different sources and different offices. So we thought about how to do that, but they're not organized that closely together. So it doesn't work very well. When I worked on this, I had them on two different monitors and was, moving back and forth and comparing what we did with both of them. And that's a good way of trying to compare those two and see what the changes are.
Does the packet that you sent us, Isaac, include both? Is that what I'm seeing in here?
Yeah, so when we actually go through to adopt the proposed changes, what we'll do is we'll strike the entirety of Chapter 103, and then we'll propose to adopt the entirety of the new proposed Chapter 103. So I've got both in the packet. So what I would encourage you guys to look at would be mostly definitions. Make sure that you're comfortable with how we're defining things, and then the green space conservation. Those are the big two that staff were looking at, and we want to make sure is right. Some of the other stuff like preliminary plats, final plats, some of that stuff we can't do a whole lot with because that's also defined in the state code. So there's some things that aren't going to change a whole lot, but kind of like what Bill said, it's hard to say exactly what has changed and what hasn't, just because with the way we're doing this is we're going to strike the entirety of what we currently have and then bring in this brand new Chapter 103.
When I was going through it, I laid the two documents side by side, and no, Heidi, you can't do a direct comparison, but if you begin to take tabs, the old material or the old subject matter is all there. It just has a better flow to it. It's more logical.
Isaac, can you send us the two documents as PDFs instead of having to, because when I try to download from the website, I just download the whole thing.
Yep, I can send them. I might have to send them in two separate emails, just with the size of the documents, but I'll send them out first thing tomorrow morning.
That'd be That would make it a lot easier as separate docs. Thanks.
How about other comments? Well, there's no vote on this one. I think the thing would be to encourage each of us to really go through it another time and come back next month prepared to take action. Isaac, for those who aren't here, if you could give them a special heads up on the sense of this conversation, that would be helpful. Anything else on this item of new business? Okay, we're going to move then to old business, comprehensive land use plan. Isaac, you had a couple of things.
Yes, so we do have a timeline set up for approximately how the comprehensive land use plan will, the events that will take place. However, we do need to make some minor changes to that with just how city's fiscal year, the city's fiscal year runs, and making sure that it lines up that once we choose a firm through the RFP process, that it's kind of lining up with the new fiscal year. So that'll be another email that I'll be sending out tomorrow morning. And then if anybody has any questions or comments about it, please let me know and we can get those addressed.
I think the one other thing I'd like to ask you to begin thinking about is one of the elements that makes this thing work is that we form a community task force. We identify individuals in the community who would come together with us, probably as many as 15 or 20. And those folks work with us throughout this process. What I'd like you to do is to begin to think about some individuals that really ought to be a part of this, people that you are maybe in another service club with, or a member of your church, or whatever, people who think about this city, people who would have something to say. And if you'd let Isaac know those names, we'll begin to develop a roster and then get that together. Dave, you've been through more than a couple of these. Anything from your perspective?
No, I think you hit it, Hank. My question to Isaac, has it been finalized with a company from Des Moines to do the leadership on the comp plan?
We don't have an RFP even done yet, and we're going to be putting that out to a number of different firms. We want to get some good proposals to bring back, to look at and see who would be the best one to lead this. I know that we are going to include the leisure services in some way because we hope to have some trail and park input from their perspective, and the Economic Development Commission would be invited to have some people from that commission participate. And there may be some other that we would want to do that with. So we're trying to make this as broad as possible when we talk about land use, and primarily it's a planning and zoning directive as far as I'm concerned. But I think those other commissions will be very valuable from their perspective, from their niche areas. So.
But I think that the P&Z needs to know that we are not using Intercock this time. It's going to be an outside planning firm. Is that correct?
So what we're going to do is give the option, because we're going to set out an RFP, and Intercock would be somebody that we would send the RFP to also. But we're going to be soliciting other firms, engineering firms especially, engineering and planning firms. There's a lot of them that do this. We've got 5 or 6 RFPs and lists of companies that do that in the state, and we want to make sure that we send that out. I know a couple of the cities have sent out 7, 8, 9 of them and gotten responses from a lot of them back to be able to choose. We can do that and interview, cut it down to interviews of 1, 2, or 3 firms at the end, and then make the decision based on actual interviews with the firms we want to have in the final. And that means Intercock isn't a shoe-in for this. But I think we owe them the ability to respond to the RFP if they choose.
Will the P&Z have any input or his involvement when it gets down to, say, the final couple that you're looking at?
Yes, we intend to have that be because what will happen is that we'll make our recommendation to the council for approval of that consultant, and I think this body would be the best one to do the interview and the evaluation process. So we're still working out those details also, and we'll bounce that off of this group. We want your input on how that's done.
I think the last time we did with the firm, not Intercock, was it 95 or was it 2000? I can't remember, but it was one of those two. Do you remember, or do you know? Otherwise, it's been Intercock ever since that. I think that first time, I believe.
McClure Engineering out of Fort Dodge one year.
Who was it?
McClure Engineering.
Yes, that was the first year. Terry, I can't remember his last name.
I can't help you on this one, Dave. I didn't come on board until 2004.
I think it's going to be. I mean, we've read some other ones that have been done by other firms, and they're pretty good. They're pretty creative, and so I just want to see what's out there to evaluate that. I think, and I don't think this should be staff driven. I think it needs to be staff and the commission driven. I think that's what we want to see from this group.
Well, we'll keep doing these updates as we go through this process, and as you have thoughts or suggestions, get together with Isaac and Bill, and let's make this thing work. We've got a good year ahead of us.
I'm presuming that the council's going to support the budget item. We put a $60,000 budget item in for this, so that was the number that was kind of given to us by other cities that have done it in the last couple of years. So we feel that'll be adequate. But everything's unclear until we get the council's go ahead during the budget process.
Bill, do we know what we spent in 2011?
I don't know because I wasn't involved in that. I think in 17, what do we have, like 12,000 or something?
Well,
review.
In 17, though, we were only doing the review and not nearly the comprehensive look that we did back in 11.
We tried to use other companies or other cities that have done this, and a couple our size or close to our size, and really the extent of what they did. This was in the 50 to 60 range, so we think we're good with this range.
Any other comments on the progress to date on the comp plan? I've got one other thing I'd like to get the council of the commission on. I've asked staff to explore the possibility of moving our meetings back to City Hall, utilizing the community rooms on the north side of this facility. The rooms are adequately sized to provide for social distancing. What are your thoughts on bringing it back here if we could?
I guess I personally would like to recommend we maybe wait another month to make that decision. We're still pretty fresh after the holidays, and we are starting to see an increase in cases locally and across the state. So I think I would personally feel better if maybe we see where we're at in February. And
that was the intent, not to set a firm date tonight, or even we don't even know whether it's going to be well received, but it just seems it's so much nicer to be able to see your faces and to feel the sense of the group. It's very difficult in on a board like this. Any other comments?
I second.
I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me. I've been at several meetings over there across the hall and separated out by, in a group where it's been 10 or 12 feet between us with the tables the way they're set. I thought it worked out very well.
Anybody else, pro or con?
I'm with Heidi.
I'd just like to get a little bit more vaccination time in.
Yes. Doug?
You muted.
Well, I've already had the coronavirus, so it doesn't matter to me if you believe the science. I can't get it and I can't give it to you, so.
Well, welcome back.
Yeah, well, I'm healthy.
Okay, well, we're going to explore it and see what the possibilities are. It just may not be possible, but if it is, we ought to be able to look at it and make a decision. Any other business for us? If not, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
In a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion is second. It doesn't take a vote. I think the motions take care of it. Thank you all very much and welcome to 2021.